Oh, I think I have just the thing. How would you like an El Camino? Ooh, I like that. That's good, yeah. Yo creo que te vas a meter una bronca grande aquí, señor. ¡Raúl!
Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo, broadcasting live, as always, from the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado. This week, we have a really special episode. This is one I've been looking forward to for a long time. The Copa de la Diversión program in minor league baseball is one of my favorite programs that they run from a design standpoint and from a fan experience standpoint. Essentially, minor league baseball teams, most of the minor league baseball teams in affiliated minor league baseball have alternate Spanish language brands, the purpose of which is to reach out to Spanish speaking fans. And one of the designers who has been prolific in that program is Ryan Foose of Fooser Sports Design, who is with me here today. Ryan, thank you for being here.
Hello. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Very happy to be talking about the work you've done with the Copa de la Diversión program in minor league baseball. You've done, do you have a count? How many of these logos have you actually done for the Copa program?
Oh boy, I should have counted prior. I think it's probably somewhere between 30-ish. It's floating around there, but yeah, especially front loaded, pretty heavy in the program, and it's definitely teams have gone elsewhere and internal, but yeah, somewhere around 30, I would say.
So that's right now there are about 100. Well, there are exactly 120 affiliated minor league baseball teams.
Mm-hmm.
Roughly 90 of them are doing the Copa program, and you've done about 30 of those brands. So you've done about a third of the working Copa brands in minor league baseball right now. So that is pretty impressive. You mentioned some of the early brands. This program got started in 2017 with just 4 teams. I know that you did at least 2 of those brands. I am wearing the Mariachis cap right now from the Albuquerque Isotopes, which won the Fun Cup, the Copa de la Diversión, the first 2 times that they actually held it. And then one of the other ones, which is another cap that I'm turning away from my microphone because I'm looking at my hats back here, but I've got the Las Vegas Reyes de Plata as well. So those were 2 of the first 4. Did you work on the other 2 brands?
So Kane County joined,
right,
and they just did a kind of a very minimal effort, we'll say. Charlotte was part of it as well.
Right.
I did a secondary logo as that, and Vince Petafrezzo did the main cap logo. But we're looking at how do we expand minor league baseball to be what we wanted it to be? Because I think even 6 or 7 years ago, from a league headquarters perspective, it was very business-like. And our social media at that point was very player-focused and plays-focused, which tend to be super grainy. And it didn't invoke what we were telling people we were, that we were at that time 160 individual communities that come together for baseball, and we're this outside-the-box thinking group, but we were running the leagues from a higher up perspective, very business-like. And so we realized that we had a trademark to "It's Fun to Be a Fan" that we had used decades and decades earlier, when we decided to bring it back, did the whole branding. That was the first project I ever had at minor league baseball, was how do we brand "It's Fun to Be a Fan." We had a whole reason series. We had our social media team start saying, focus on the food, focus on the jerseys, focus on the fans. And so then it became this thing of, we could go to a potential partner of the league. We could go to these individual clubs and go, do you see how the reaction is when people are focused on stuff outside of baseball? Because we had all these studies where 50% of people didn't even pay attention to the game. Only 20% of people could actually tell you the score of the game when they left. It was all about just the experience. And so part of that was this delving into, how do we go after demographics that aren't quite represented in our fandom? And so now, fast forward, all those kind of representations are coming out, that you have Copa, you have the 9 program for the Black demographic, the Pride program has taken off. So it kind of looked at all these, that I don't think it was supposed to be all teams would be in Copa or all teams would be in 9, that it would be, do you have a Latino fan base that is not represented? Do you have a Black fan base that isn't represented within your fandom? And so Copa was the first one we dove into, because every metric was Latin America loves sports. And when you're talking about Venezuela, Puerto Rico, Dominican, it is almost exclusively baseball. And we wanted to really capture that. And I think if you're going to have a fun brand, the 9 program goes historic, but the Copa program goes a lot more colors and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And so the first 4 teams were based on hitting different markets. So you had Vegas, which was an up and coming kind of Latino market because of hospitality. You had Chicago, which is more old school. You had Charlotte that had its own kind of thing going. And so it was one of those that we really wanted to test it out and make sure, is this doing what it needs to do? And that's frankly the reason that I was so heavily involved in the branding from the get-go. Is a lot of these teams go, why are we doing this? And it's no fault their own. It's just, frankly, it's a lot of older white people in front office that go, how does this work? And so we said, we'll take care of a lot of the branding and help you along the way, because we want to make sure that you spend the time doing outreach, doing, Spanish focused marketing, hiring people that are bilingual, and really making it more than just a brand, but an actual transformation of how those organizations are operated for those demographics.
Sure. So Fooser Sports Design has been around for 10 years. I saw on social media, you're celebrating your 10th anniversary. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
When you talk about we with minor league baseball, what was your relationship with minor league baseball proper as an organization when this program was launched?
So for a 3-year stretch, I was head of brand development at minor league baseball. So Fooser kind of took a back seat for all of those years. And it was brought on because we were outsourcing to the Studio Simons of the world. We were outsourcing to different groups to say, hey, we need to do this. We need to do this. So I think Dan did a dozen or so opening day logos. I know he was in charge of a lot of the baseball winter meeting stuff. And so it was a matter of, can we start an internal design group and bulk up our marketing group to say, let's start taking this more in-house and in real time kind of alter what we were doing. So yeah, so Fooser, while I've adopted these brands under that moniker, it was me working with a couple designers in-house saying, how can we make this possible? Whether it was working with a partner and overnight having to figure out what these platforms might look like, or the Copa program itself.
This explains, by the way, why Dan Simon sent me a box of hats with his designs on them, and a number of them are from the winter meetings logos that he designed. Yes. So I have more baseball winter meetings baseball caps than most people do. So let's talk about these first couple that you did here, because they're, the program, there's been so many good logos in this program. Like I said, I am wearing the teal or turquoise version of the Albuquerque Isotopes Mariachis brand. I went to a game there I've actually been to 2 Mariachis games. It's about a 7-hour drive from Fort Collins. And then the then 51s. This is sort of an interesting thing with the Las Vegas franchise. When their Copa brand was unveiled, it was the Las Vegas Reyes de Plata, and they were the Las Vegas 51s. Obviously, they switched to be the Aviators when they changed stadiums and moved out to Summerlin, but they kept their Copa brand. And so these were, 2 of the first 4 Copa brands, and it wasn't even really called the Copa de la Diversión that first year, was it? It was called.
No, yeah, we kind of. I think we were just teasing it. I think the Copa side of things came in secondarily, that we wanted it to be. So the winner of the Copa, the Cup every year, is based on not just on field, but really a focus on off field. So how much, did you have in sales, ticketing? How much do you donate? All that kind of stuff. Did you increase your staff and all that kind of stuff? And so, yeah, that first year, it was just kind of we for sure didn't want to say heritage or anything like that. We didn't want it to seem like a one-off, but I don't even know what we maybe even potentially said it as, or the beginning of what Copa will be. But yeah, it was a very bare bones start.
So in that start, obviously the Mariachis brand and the Reyes de Plata brand, they have a specific visual vernacular, right? That it does have a sort of cultural aesthetic. It does have, they're a sort of Hispanic visual aesthetic about it. What kind of research did you do going into that as a designer, specific to the communities and specific to being as sensitive as possible in creating a brand that represents a whole community or a whole culture?
So we had Latino individuals within our office that, we covered the bases in terms of different cultures within that Hispanic realm. We made sure that the teams were involved from the get-go, and we made sure that each one of those teams then reached out to somebody. So Charlotte had a Latino Chamber of Commerce that was their sounding board. Vegas, I believe, had a Latino museum of sorts that was involved. So we made sure that if you're going to be a part of this, you have to take a deep dive and kind of spend more time on it than you would for a specialty night.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was always feedback from the individuals, because I think that was also a misnomer for a lot of teams that came on board was, all right, we're going to do Copa. Let's do green and red. It's going to be awesome. And then not putting together fully from the get-go that you might be in a Puerto Rican demographic, and by showing green and red, you've already lost them. And so it was kind of working through that to say, if we are, so with both Albuquerque and Las Vegas, it was heavily Mexican. So we made sure that the sounding board involved folks that are not only from Mexico, but maybe have been in the area for a long time and are fifth generation, have seen kind of how their culture has evolved and kind of mixed with Nevada and New Mexico ways of life. But it was a very tedious process in terms of, you don't want to embarrass the teams, you don't want to embarrass yourself, and just making sure it sounds good. And so we had a lot of good back and forth with the folks in Albuquerque. I think some of the earlier concepts was like the mariachi was singing. We thought, like, let's invoke the music style. Is there a kind of this big old guitar that it's holding? And they were very, very set on, we have gone and done our research and done our interviews, and we take this kind of aspect of our culture very seriously. And that's when it ended up being kind of, a lot of the musical notes are hidden within the design, but it is more of a straightforward, that they didn't want it to be this goofy minor league baseball-esque design. They wanted it to be something that was a statement of kind of their heritage. So definitely learning curves for everybody involved, but I mean, it worked out. And I think out of all of them that I've done, that one always kind of gets brought up first. So it definitely kudos to them for being willing to speak their mind on, this is how we believe it should be, because of the research and kind of talks we've had.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this one. I mean, it's pretty interesting. Like I said, I'm wearing it now and I keep sort of leaning forward so I can look at it in my own camera here. But it has the Day of the Dead skull. Then it has the mariachi hat, the sort of traditional style Mexican hat, but it's sort of a combination of, of a sort of a Day of the Dead theme, and then the musical notes, and then the traditional sort of Mexican hat. I mean, and the first thing that, I sort of noticed with this, I mean, I spent some time in Mexican City during Day of the Dead, and I remember they were sort of lamenting that, Americans, in their words, Americans sort of treat Day of the Dead as like a Mexican Halloween now. And it's not that, right? Like, it's meant to be a sort of very somber thing. So it's interesting to me to see it featured in a very respectful way in a logo for a team, called the Mariachis, right? Like, there's a lot going on sort of culturally in this logo. And so it's really interesting for me to hear you say, how insistent the team was with the research they were doing and the community members they were working with, that this is what they wanted to see featured in this logo.
Yeah, and so I think it was different in a lot of ways. I think the sugar skull is just such a unique aspect, and I mean, you ask most people, skulls are just fun.
Sure.
It is one of those things. And so Las Vegas there was a thought process that we tried to pitch it, and we even came back around years later with Chuck and the guys over there, of what happens if you did a human miner for the day game, and then the very next night during the night game you switch back to the skull, to kind of have this combination of this day and night, and this kind of U.S. culture meets Mexican culture, and they didn't quite push forward with it. But then I've had conversations with teams that their first thought was like, yeah, we want to do a sugar skull. And I think that there's been some pushback of how do you want it to do it, for the exact same reasons that there is a moment where it gets a little too cartoony, and it gets a little, and then Vegas, I think, teeters that line to some extent. Yeah, I always worry when the next batch comes out is how many are going to rely on that, because it was just such a huge part of it was the easy go-to thing to do.
Sure. Well, and in those first two that we're talking about now, the mariachis, like you say, they've got the sugar skull, and then the Reyes de Plata, which is Silver Kings. It's, there is a skull with a mustache and sort of a miner's hat. And so, yeah, so it's, I appreciate the amount of research that's gone into these, because you could see how it could go off the rails if it's not treated, respectfully. So that's not to say then that there aren't some that haven't had some fun with it, right? Like, I mean, there's I think one of the ones that gets a lot of attention is the San Antonio Flying Chanclas, which is essentially a flip-flop sailing through the air. That's definitely a fun one. One of the ones that I really like, I've got this cap back here as well. The Eugene Emeralds did the Monarcas de Eugene. Are there some that you've done from your creation that you feel like really reflect like a more lighthearted approach to this program?
Yeah, I think that there's I don't want to say that any of them didn't take it seriously, because I think everybody did. I think the ones that I really enjoyed are the ones that almost didn't get much kind of notoriety. Like Modestos was something that I was really, really excited for. So they were the Alibrejas, which is kind of the spear animal. So in that culture, it's never quite a dog. It's kind of it's always a mix of animals. And so we created their own spirit animal based on, it was like the coyote from the area. It was the golden eagle from Mexico, and then the moose from the Seattle Mariners mascot. And so stuff like that, where it was just like a really fun of, I don't think anybody thought we were going to do this morphed collaboration of all these animals and ideas, and with bright colors and all that kind of stuff. And so stuff like that, I think, was really, really fun. Eugene was an interesting one too, and having a lot of conversations, and similar to mariachis in some perspective. Is it this angry kind of butterfly, because sports logos tend to skew that way in some way, and we ended up going kind of with more symbolic references to it. And they did their release of their brand at an elementary school that was predominantly Latino, and just like these little kids rocking butterfly wings. And it's like, it's okay that not everything is this macho, angry looking animal. So I think that there's definitely Zoros recently with Somerset was more also kind of a play on, we just want to create this sneaky little character and add kind of these elements of culture into the patterning of tiles on the sleeve and stuff like that. But I think there's some that went really kind of serious with it, but I think there's also a decent amount that slowly over time realize that it doesn't have to be chock full of cultural relevance, as long as you can make the connection and the storyline that you can tell people why you're doing it. I think it kind of changed over time.
Sure. You mentioned a couple there that I was actually going to bring up, I think, because these are really fun. So I mentioned the Eugene Emeralds did the Monarcas, which is a monarch butterfly, and it was meant to be a metaphor for the journey that the players take to the major leagues. And so not specific to any Latin culture, but obviously the iconography in that logo, if you look at it carefully, I mean, there's all sorts of patterns, and it is a butterfly wearing a crown because monarch, and then it's a baseball bat for the body, and then he's got these little sort of furrowed brow insect eyes looking at the screen. So that's one. I have that one on a cap here back behind me too. So I've got a lot of your work on caps hanging on the wall behind me.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, that was definitely one of those. I think each dot represented a Spanish speaking country. There's forestry. There was the Three Sisters in Oregon. Yeah, it was just one of those that always thinking about how is this eventually going to embroider, and just making sure that there's this kind of delicate balance and game that is played with that.
Yeah. I did notice when I got that hat that the logo was actually slightly bigger than it is on many of my hats. And I think it's because it's a more detailed logo that required that larger space for the embroidery. That's interesting that you bring that up. So I'm not a Spanish speaker. It's taken me until now to apologize for my Spanish pronunciation, but I'm going to give this one a try. The Modesto Nuts Alebrijes, I think, is this creature that was created. I love the explanation of it's a spirit animal, and the things that are factored into the creation of this spirit animal are relevant to that area. And the fact that they've got the moose antlers, and that's a really fun explanation of that one. That particular logo is really quite colorful. I mean, a lot of these Copa brands are very colorful, but that one I think is as colorful as I've seen. When you brought up, the use of those colors and being culturally sensitive about that, like you said, there's a lot of cultures in these Spanish speaking communities. And so you can't just say, oh, well, we're picking these colors because they look Hispanic or they look Latin. What is that process like, especially in a logo as colorful as this one that you did for Modesto? Choosing all of these. I'm looking at there's like a cyan blue, there's a bright pink magenta, there's yellow, there's like a lime green. Might just be those four, and that's what they say for color for logo design, right? They just the four colors. It creates the impression of having a lot more colors than that. What's that process for you of making sure that you're being culturally sensitive and selecting colors, that are meant to look a certain way, but, could easily be sort of, become sort of a trope almost, and just like, oh, this feels Hispanic.
I think if you look back at the first true year of Copa, you'll see a lot of black crowns, navy crowns. It was very subdued because I think more often than not, black and dark color crowns, they look good. It just is one of those things. And then you'll all of a sudden see in the second year, based on the success of San Antonio going with bright light blue and pink and yellows, you saw a transformation of now you're almost an outlier if you do a kind of darker color set. And so I think it's a double-edged sword, because I think there's a lot of people that don't necessarily wear the hats because it's just too bright for them, and that's it is what it is. And especially when we live in this fitted cap culture where you have the matching shoes and shirt and all that kind of stuff, some of these get a little intense. So it was kind of does it need to be bright? Yes. But then how can you tie it in all together? And I think that probably goes for a lot of brands in sports, that there's just some cities and you just saw it with the Maulers football team switching away from purple and orange and going black and yellow, because it's like you hear the colors black and yellow and you're going to get a Pittsburgh reaction from it. Right. And so I think that for some of these, it connected, like the Monarchas, it made sense that it's the Monarchs orange and yellow color plus the bright lime green of Eugene. For some of them, it was based on Osos Pelores back when Pawtucket had a team that was specifically for Puerto Rican and Dominican colorways. So it was a matter of, can you connect a culture to it, but then also realizing that sometimes it just needs to be that way. And so I think mariachis, we keep coming back to it, is a perfect example. It started as a colorway that was mariachis. It's black, white, and red. That is mariachis. There's no other variation of it. And then the turquoise came in because it's a Southwest color. It's a that turquoise stone and jewelry is very prevalent within that Southwest Mexican culture, and so it made sense that kind of transitioned in a way. But color is just super important, and you try to make it fit. And every time I do a project, regardless of what sport, if it could be a restaurant, it could be a brewery, it could be anything, there ends up being a whole lot of color concepts that get thrown out there once the design is settled, because there's just some reasons it works, whether it's subconscious or not. But all of these teams, they're either truly spoke to what the imagery was, or it spoke to kind of what offshoot of the Latino culture it came from.
One of the clearest ways to talk about culture is food, right? I mean, that's every culture has it, and it's distinct with every culture. So, it's hard not to notice that a lot of these Copa brands relate to food in some way, sometimes directly, sometimes it's food and drink. Just from some ones that you've worked on, the Clinton elotes. The Colorado Rockies do a thing called the elote tots, which is tater tots with like a corn elote sauce on it, which is delicious. So you've got the Clinton elotes, the Durham Bulls did the cervezas, Corpus Christi raspas, maybe the Lake County picantes. So there's a number, of these that you have worked on that are specific to food. What is that conversation like? I mean, it must be easy to sort of default to that, especially with the popularity of the food-based logos throughout minor league baseball. And because it is such an important part of just sort of talking about culture anyway, the temptation to turn to a food-based logo must be pretty strong.
Yeah, and I think there was also a time when, and it kind of intersected perfectly with Copa, where every single team seemed like they were coming out with a food identity. There was a food identity craze for a while. So I think it started slow with not many food identities, just because they felt like it was being overdone. And while I know like El Paso says they created the margarita and that's why they're margaritas, I think there's a lot of other that it's just is it the Frisco, they're just the queso, and it's just like, all right, maybe that has some connection to it and all that kind of stuff. But I think that a lot of these communities, we tried to go just one or two steps deeper, and some of them went that way and some of them just kind of stayed on the surface. But if you have a taco you could be in New York, you can be in California, you can be in Florida, all have their own variations, but it doesn't necessarily pinpoint you to a place. And so Corpus Christi felt really good about Raspas because they're snow cones and all that kind of stuff. That's their kind of thing. And they have these little huts around this ballpark, and that's what it is. And it made sense for them. I think, it's comes back to this balancing act of, you want to be specific to your region and you want to be specific to your city and your brand. And so I've had a few conversations with teams that wanted to be part of Copa or wanted to rebrand in Copa, and ended up putting too much pressure on themselves of, well, what is us? What is us? What is us? And they ended up backing out or kind of just staying with what they had for another year, because it is really tough. You want to make a point to say, this is us. And that's why we had two Coquis teams for a couple of years, because in heavily Puerto Rican circles, everybody knows the Coqui frog is their bald eagle. And so I think there was a little bit of worry of, I need to be unique. And then slowly over time, you started seeing the food become more and more of a thing, because whether they thought they didn't have options or whether that was just, we know this is going to sell. But it's a weird thing, because music and food is so important.
Yeah.
But how do you make it seem very specific to your city if it is more of a larger dish, I guess you could say?
Sure. So one more question for you here before I let you go. Well, I could talk about this all day, all night, but I talk a lot on this podcast about how I object on principle to teams being named for their parent clubs, minor league teams being named for their parent clubs. The sort of natural progression of that with the Copa program is teams doing direct translations of their own nickname into, a Spanish language version of that nickname. Looking through your portfolio of Copa brands here, I didn't really see any that were direct translations. They were, they're all unique identities. How important is it, or is it important at all, to create a connection between the Copa brand and the primary identity of a team? And, what do you have a philosophy? Do you have a strong feeling on, whether the team creates just a Spanish language version of their own brand?
So if you looked at our old kind of marketing and guidelines and what we wanted this to be, point one was we didn't want to be like the NBA, where
Mm-hmm.
you had Los Heat and Los Bulls and all that kind of stuff. We
Right.
made it very clear that was rule number one, is you need to make an attempt to find something that's unique to you. And point two was, you can't say this is our heritage night, because building an entire program about a demographic, but then boiling it down to this night is for you only, is a very, very double-edged sword of kind of understanding that you're welcome to this ballpark and we're going to make time for you on this one evening. So that's why we kind of almost forced and kind of required these teams that you had to play at least 3-4 games. It had to be a series. You could do it all at once, you could spread it out, but you have to make this a recurring thing. So we were very, very against translations. If you somehow did a translation, create this identity that felt different, like it truly was, hey, this was a Venezuelan version of so and so.
Right.
But I think, yeah, we definitely pushed. There was probably a few teams that came to us and said, we're just going to be this, and we ended up guiding them in a different direction. But I think it's there's moments that you can include the team's normal brands into these specialty nights. And that's why I think Iron Pigs do such a great job, as no matter what the Iron Pigs do for a number of years, whether it was the Wiener Dogs or anything like that, it felt like a shoot off of what the Iron Pigs brand. You knew it was the Iron Pigs.
Right.
And I think that's really important and really special. But when you start getting into why the program was created and hope to do more, I think it's okay that these teams are kind of wacky and on their own and stand alone as their own brand. So long story short, no low something. And you really had to commit to it. You couldn't just view this as a true one-off night.
Well, this program is so great, and it's generated so many logos, and and I do this podcast because I want to learn about the cultures, and I want to learn about these places that I might not otherwise know. And so the Copa brand has opened the door to so many more, stories to be told out there. And so I think that is so important, and it's been so successful, and I really appreciate it. So I would like to have you come back on and talk about some of these specific teams as I start featuring them later on in the podcast. But in the meantime, I appreciate you coming on and talking about the program in general. And, I appreciate all the great work that you've done on all these logos that I have on hats behind me.
I greatly appreciate your time. Obviously read a lot of stuff from sportslogos.net. That was the Bible for many, many years. And appreciate you covering the sport and design in particular. It's been good to have people like you in our corner.
Well, I appreciate that very much, and I plan to keep doing it. Ryan, where can people find you online and on social media?
Everything's Fooser Sports. So Foosersports.com, Fooser Sports on IG, Twitter, all that good stuff. And so, appreciate the time and look forward to some new designs that are coming out this year and next and beyond.
Can't wait. Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, welcome back. What a moment for me here. It's been way too long. I mean, my very good friend, fellow podcaster from the Dad Hat Chronicles, Ed Rivera. If you listen to this podcast, you should be listening to Ed's podcast as well. So Ed is a huge fan of baseball logos, in particular, as seen on Dad Hats, of which Ed and I are both fans. Ed, welcome back to Baseball by Design. Thanks for being here.
I love the intro. I feel so special now.
I am, I want every guest to feel special, but you in particular, because, we're best podcaster buds here. This is,
we are,
and we're making plans to see some baseball in person this summer.
Yeah, we are.
And our respective significant others are going to join us on a road trip. So we got a lot going on here. We got a lot.
Yeah,
going
we do.
On here.
It's exciting time, right? The planning stages,
right.
Get into all the stuff that we get to do during the summer for our podcast. So super excited for this year for sure.
We're getting close enough to baseball season.
Oh, thank God.
Like the drudgery of the off season is sort of wearing off a little bit. We're under a month until spring training games start. And so, we're reaching a point now where we can be like, okay, we can focus on this.
We got some spring training, some World Baseball Classic coming. So, hey, why not? Right.
I'm excited about all these things.
Exactly.
So this episode, as you know, I've been speaking with Ryan Foose of Fooser Sports Design, who has created some of the amazing Copa de la Diversión logos that you and I love so much. And I thought it would be interesting to talk to you. Ryan and I talked a little bit about the particulars of, the fact that there are different communities within the Spanish speaking fan bases, right? Like it's not
Who would
just
have thought that? Who would have thunk it?
Yeah, it's hilarious, right? Like it's hilarious that people would just think of like, oh, Spanish speakers as one big block of fans. When one of the fan bases that we talked about in particular was the Puerto Rican fan bases. There are Puerto Rican communities in many minor league baseball cities of varying sizes. And people, I think it is a well-known fact that you are of Puerto Rican descent, and
very much so, yes.
That part of your identity is very important to you. It's a very big part of who you are as a person and as a baseball fan. And so I thought it would be very interesting to speak to you and to have someone who can correct me on the pronunciation of all of these team names. So,
I will, which is great.
So anyhow, I just wanted to talk to you in general at first about, as a member of the Puerto Rican community and as a fan of logos and minor league baseball, has the Copa de la Diversión program reached you in the way that they're hoping it might have?
Absolutely. Yes. Listen, logos are fun. I love logos. Obviously, you already know we collect Dad hats, and we specifically like a lot of the ones that are different, right? Like, obviously there's some cool ones that we love. Everybody loves the classic ones, Durham Bulls, the Toledo Mud Hens, all these other, classic ones. But when you have a whole program designed to prop the Hispanic culture within baseball, obviously, as you can see in Major League Baseball, a big, large community is, Spanish speaking. So,
right.
You automatically gravitated towards that. And when I found out about the program, I was like, that's it. I'm in.
Yeah.
Come in.
One of the dangers when you first hear about something like this, one of the dangers of it in my mind is if you don't engage the communities, you risk caricaturizing them, right? And, and speaking down to them in a way, like, just like, hey, here's something that looks like you would like it. From the conversation with Ryan, it feels like that minor league baseball has been very intentional about reaching out to the individual communities in these individual markets for minor league baseball. And that's been one of the reasons I think that this program has been successful.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the fact that, one, you reached out, and two, you want to make sure that you are doing it the right way, right? Like, I mean, yes, you reached out and you're like, okay, you have conversations. All right, we're going to do our own thing. No, like, we want you to be part of the design process. We want you to, to tell us what you guys think, so that way we can create a logo that is, that honors your Hispanic heritage.
Sure. So as Pat Larson says in his minor league baseball hat history series, let's get to the hats. I always love in his videos when he says, let's get to the hats.
Let's get to the hats. That's my favorite part.
There are, probably 90 some of these logos that exist for teams. I think that you and I agree on the sort of parallel, and I said this to Ryan, the sort of parallel to a minor league baseball team being named for its parent club. The parallel in the Copa program is if it's just a direct translation of their own team name. So I understand that you, in selecting the ones that you like, you have discounted any that take that path.
Correct. If you translated your name into in Spanish, I automatically discounted you, because listen, the logos are great. I own some of those.
Yeah.
But I look at it as being, I hate to say this, but like, very lazy about it.
Sure.
Right. You didn't do anything.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, I automatically discounted the names that were automatically a direct translation.
Yeah.
So I didn't go with those at all.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, let's get to the hats. What are some of your favorite Copa brands here?
All right. So I'll start with one of the first ones that I liked a lot is the Cervezas de Durham.
Okay. Yeah. A beer can, a crumpled beer can.
Crumpled beer can. The colors are amazing. The name is awesome, right? Who doesn't like beer?
Truly.
Automatically I liked it. That was one of my favorite ones.
Okay.
So
Cervezas.
And again, I'm giving you a list. I give you 10 that I liked a lot.
Yeah.
But they're in no order whatsoever. Like
Of course,
I don't have a favorite one. Right.
Right. We don't do hyperbole. We just do. We're not ranking anything here. We're just picking
Yeah.
out the ones that we like. Okay.
That's a different episode. Okay. The next one is the Coquis of Lehigh Valley.
Okay.
Automatically, you knew that I was going to say that. The coquille is it's an animal that is very important to the Puerto Rican culture.
Yeah.
I have a tattoo on my arm, so the coquille is very important to us.
Okay. It's one of 2 coquille logos. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself.
But that was an honorable mention.
Okay.
It from the Florida Firefox.
Yeah.
I didn't mention it, one, because the Firefox, one, in Spanish, 2, they're no longer around, but they named this of the coquilles. They were around. I did not get a Dad Hat by then, so I was unable to get one of those, which is such a great logo.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's an honorable mention just because, again, it goes back to my heritage, and I couldn't say no to that one.
That came up when I was speaking with Ryan as well, that coquille is important to the Puerto Rican culture. Why is it important to the Puerto Rican culture?
Pretty much is everywhere. Unless one that there was like, you hear it at night, right, guys? As soon as that night hit, you hear that sound, and it's like that one sound that as a kid you hear, and it just puts you to sleep.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Native American use it a lot in their culture as well. So like the tattoo that I have is an actual native symbol of the coquille itself. So
okay,
very important.
I think I got to get that hat. I think I might have to get a coquille hat from the Iron Pigs.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a couple of them actually. I don't have the Dad Hat though. I do have the snapback one, but I went to go get the Dad Hat, but it was sold out. So I'm waiting for them to get some more so I can get it. So
all right,
definitely that one. Okay, number 3 for me. Alces the Maine.
Oh, I'm less familiar with this one.
So that is from obviously Maine.
Look at it. Oh, like the moose antlers.
The moose, and if you look at the moose. Right there.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Is it a baseball glove?
They look like baseball gloves.
Yeah. If my voice just got real loud on the podcast, it was because I was leaning way in to see this.
No, right? We're both leaning on it. But yeah, that one is one of my favorites. The colors are amazing. The design on the moose itself, like it has little patterns to it. Yeah. So they did a really good job with this one. So that's
okay. Say that word again for me.
Alces. ALCES.
Right. Okay. And the logo is meant to look like the Alces is written, and it looks like an antler written.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good one.
That
one doesn't get a lot of attention out there in the world.
No, it doesn't, right? Yeah. But it's still, it's very, to their area, which they hit the Hispanic culture, but they also hit their territory, which is pretty cool, right? So
yeah,
I like that one a lot. It doesn't get the respect that it should, but
that's good, and beautiful colors. The hat is great. The light blue and the pink brim.
The pink,
it's really
right? Okay. Exactly. All right, number 4. And we talked about this, you and me, off air, but the Wepas de Worcester. Right.
Wepas.
Right. The Wepas. Right. Again, they went something different. When you say us Hispanic, when you say hi or something like that, it's like Wepa, right? Yeah. So you say it like that, like with umph on it.
It's an exclamation.
And exactly. So that one, it as soon as I saw the name Wepa, right? Sometimes when they mention the name and then they don't release the logo, you're like, oh man,
you're like, what's this gonna be? Yeah.
Exactly.
It's
right.
like fireworks.
Yeah, right. Fireworks, good. Explosion, and it was beautiful. Yeah. It was well done. Red, white, and blue. Teams need to get away from red, white, and blue, but for this one, it worked. So it was nice.
And what a great combination of accents when you can say "Wepas de Worcester."
Exactly, you like that? That's pretty good.
Wepas de Worcester.
The next one that I'm going to go over, number 5, is Los Perros Calientes de Akron.
Okay? The Akron hot dogs.
Yep, the Akron hot dogs. So I went back with this one. It's a funny one because literally Perros Calientes is hot dog, right? And then it's like a hot dog literally on fire, running.
Yeah.
And it's funny, it's hilarious. And I mean, who doesn't like hot dogs? I love hot dogs. So I love that one. That one was great.
Okay.
Couldn't say no to Akron.
No. Of course, your hometown, kind of. You're hour
Kind of,
away
right.
from your, yeah.
Exactly. So love that one. Number 6,
Okay.
Gallos del Marba.
Oh, this is the big rooster.
Yeah, the colorful rooster.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
for people that don't know, my Chinese zodiac is the rooster.
Oh,
I'm
learning a lot about you tonight.
I know, right? Gallos also is an important animal as well in Puerto Rico. They used to do a lot of what they call cockfighting in Puerto Rico. But the rooster is like, very colorful, very loud.
Yeah.
Also describes me. So
Ed the Gallos.
yeah, exactly. So there's that one. One that I really recently started liking a lot. And this one hits the a different Hispanic culture, Guerreros de Fayetteville, from the Fayetteville Woodpeckers.
Okay. Guerreros is like a
Guerreros.
warrior, like a soldier?
Warriors.
Warrior.
Exactly.
Okay. All right.
Right. So Fayetteville, known for like, Air Force being there, armed forces and all that. So they translated that warrior into Spanish, and they have a beautiful logo, baby blue with some yellow on it and red.
Okay.
It is beautiful. So
another one that doesn't get a ton of attention.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't get a lot. Some of them are getting, we should eventually go into the ones that are getting attention for the for the wrong reasons. But that one. Another one, Erie, the piñatas, the Erie.
The piñatas. That's a really fun one.
Right. Erie Seawolves, right? You have a bull in this one, right? So they're not using. That's why I picked this one, because they picked the piñatas and everything.
Right.
And then you talked about this. I think it was in one of your podcasts.
Yeah.
About the owner and everything. So one of my favorites. Very colorful. Very it pops and it's beautiful.
Greg Coleman was saying he was joking on that episode of Baseball by Design when we were talking about the Seawolves. We were talking about the piñatas Copa brand, and he was saying nobody else in the Eastern League has picked up on the fact that like a piñata is something that you essentially beat with a baseball bat. So he's like, nobody has talked about the fact that we're getting beaten with baseball bats.
I mean, how could you not pick up on that? That's amazing. So, so that one's one of my favorites. Lakewood's from Lakewood, Medusas.
So good. This is absolutely one of my favorites here. Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
They used the purple, the hot pink on it, right? I mean, that one pops so
the purple
good.
And the pink and the white, and with the octopus logo, the angry octopus. Yeah, it's a great one.
But man, that's one of my favorites. It is a beautiful logo, and I love it.
I got to get that. If I just finally got to bite the bullet and actually buy that hat.
You should definitely do it. As your friend, I tell you, gotta do it.
Okay.
And then number 10 for me is.
Are we already to 10? I feel like we just started here.
I know. I can keep going. Trust me. I got a couple more that I had to fight. But the Tumbavacas of Wichita.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
It plays on the name, right?
Yeah.
The wind surge, but it plays on it. But it has the upside down, cow tipping, right?
Right.
So it was hilarious. I was dying when I saw the logo.
Yeah.
Right. To actually have a hat with a upside down cow on it.
Right.
I couldn't say no, so I bought it right away.
That is very funny. We talked a lot about your list of 10 here. A lot of them are sort of like whimsical, right? Like a lot of them are sort of like fun, very minor league baseball-y. Many of these are more serious approaches to branding, sort of, and are making sure that they are respectful of the cultures that they're representing.
Yep.
You picked some funny ones, and I think that that's great because it shows you can still be lighthearted about this, and it's not
You
offensive.
should be lighthearted about
It's
it.
minor league baseball. It's minor league baseball.
This is not the Major League Baseball. This is not the NFL. This is not the NBA. This is
Right.
minor league baseball for a reason, and definitely, you should play on that.
Yeah. When you look at these logos all together, when you see them listed together, the colors are just so striking, right? So many bright colors. And I just feel like, man, just in general, I think teams could sort of take a cue from this, that the really colorful logos are so striking and just really pop. And it's like one of the things that I do, like on National Hat Day, when I'm looking for hats to buy, I often will sort of succumb and I'll buy like, another like navy blue hat with a logo on it that I like. But if I see a hat that is a different color than the one that I just always buy, I'm more likely to buy it, right? Like just the lime greens and the sort of light blues and pinks. I was just saying I would love a yellow Salt Lake Bees hat. I'd love to have a yellow Salt Lake Bees hat. And
Absolutely.
it doesn't exist, right? Like it doesn't exist. So
not at all.
The Copa program has really given us, just from a purely, leave out the conversation about the cultures that are being represented and the fan bases that they're trying to bring in. But in general, more colorful hats to get, more colorful logos to buy and experience out there as a fan. And, if nothing else, if you don't care about any of the other things that are involved in this program, and the other stuff in this program is very important and it's been very successful, but just from a purely like aesthetic logo fan standpoint, the logos are awesome. They're so much fun, and it's so exciting to to see these alternate brands. And so I would say that the Copa program is far and away the most successful coordinated alternate brand
100%
in the minors. Absolutely. So
100%. And it is because of, one, I think the success of different logos, right? You just, for the majority of the people the teams that decided to go away from their name and do something different, very successful, right? They're doing different colors, different logos, different names. So that has led to people like you and me who are fans of logos and fans of the merchandise to say, I like it. I want to get your merchandise. I have done that. I have a lot of the merchandise from a lot of these teams because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ed, this has been fun. I'm going to have you back on in a short while. We're going to talk about the World Baseball Classic logos.
Oh, so excited.
That's coming up in March here. But in the meantime, you and we have our weekly show that we do with Anna Di Tommaso, our live show that you can see through the Curved Brim Media Twitter feed and on YouTube. Everyone can obviously and should be subscribed to your podcast, the Dad Hat Chronicles, your Twitter handle, the Dad Hat 216.
Bingo.
And we're not changing that now that you're in a new area code. We're still leaving
we're sticking with the 216. We're gonna hold strong to the 216. I mean, I am in the 919 area code now, but 216 is where it's at.
And then what about I know that you're ramping up your Instagram page as well. What's your
Twitter handle?
Same handle. That's Brand Synergy right there. Yep.
Hey, got to make it easy for everybody to find me.
Good job by you. I have done a terrible job at that. All of my social media platforms are called different things. So it's a miracle that anyone can find me. But thank you, my friend, for coming on.
As always.
We'll see you out there in the minor league social media sphere.
All right. Hey, support the minor leagues.
It's time once again for America's favorite podcast segment after anything to do with Smartless and maybe Conan O'Brien. This is America's favorite podcast segment right now. It's Studio Simon Stumpers. Dan Simon, welcome back. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, especially with that type of hyperbole to start my day. So thank you for that.
I don't know. You want to call it hyperbole? I think it's just God's honest truth right here. So this episode, we're talking about the Copa de la Diversión program. I understand you have a trivia question, a stumper, as you will, regarding the Copa de la Diversión.
Okay. Of course, all of the Copa identities bear Spanish words as their names. And so this question deals with what would have been a Spanish name for a team years before the Copa de la Diversión program was even a glint in its creator's eye. The creator being Kurt Hunzeker, who at the time was working for minor league baseball, is now working for Major League Baseball for the minor league baseball operations department. So he is the father of Copa de la Diversión. So with that in mind, back in 2007, what Spanish word was the Visalia Oaks going to use for their new team name? One for which they even had a logo developed before ultimately deciding to change their name to the Rawhide. So was that name A, Banditos, B, Naranjas, or C, Vacas? Now, before you answer that question, if I remember correctly, you speak Spanish at least fairly well. Is that the case?
I understand Spanish okay. I majored in French in college, which is very useful living in Fort Collins, Colorado. But I do know what those words mean that you just threw out there. Obviously, banditos is bandits, naranjas is oranges, and vacas is cows. So you always repeat them. You always repeat them to give me a minute to think about it here.
Okay,
So I'm gonna let you do that.
Well, you just repeated them.
I repeated them. Okay. I'm just stalling for time.
I'll three-peat them.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh no, now we owe Phil Jackson a lot of money.
Okay. A, banditos, B, naranjas, and C, vacas.
All right.
And I'm sorry for my pronunciation. I too took French in high school, so my Spanish is not that great.
I have spent this entire episode apologizing for my pronunciation, so please don't apologize. Okay, so I'm going to try to suss this out. I like naranjas, I hope I'm saying that correctly, is my favorite for oranges because there's surely in the Visalia area, it's known for its agriculture. So I could see the orange as being an option. Vacas, cows, they ended up going with rawhide, which obviously relates to the notion of cows in a way. Banditos, I don't know. Banditos isn't just ringing true with me. I could maybe my spidey sense is off there. Because they ended up going with rawhide and vacas means cows. As much as I like naranjas, I'm going to go with vacas.
Once again, your deductive reasoning has landed you in pay dirt. So you are correct. And that name certainly makes sense, given that Tulare County, where Visalia is located, is the largest dairy production region in the nation. And as was explained to me at the time, I'm the one who did the aforementioned logo that was developed for this name. As the front office people explained to me, there were more cows than people in Tulare County. The other names do make sense. As you didn't mention banditos, but I'll give you a little history on that.
Okay.
But first, with regard to naranjas, oranges, behind dairy, navel oranges are the county's second leading agricultural product. So that would have made perfect sense for them. But also with regard to banditos, back in the Wild West days, some of the early citizens of Visalia were, how should we say, an unsavory lot who were known to prey on the travelers along the Butterfield Overland stage route that ran through the town. So banditos would have been equally appropriate as far as a name goes for that team. But of course, none of those were chosen. But I will say that another Studio Simon identity did become the first Spanish name for a baseball team before the Copa program was developed. And that, of course, was the featured identity in episode fill in the blank of the Baseball by Design podcast, the Daytona Tortugas.
This is where I thought you were going. And then I was just like, nah, that's too easy. It's too easy, Dan. There's no way he's going with Tortugas, but obviously a classic brand. And yeah, the first of the Spanish language brands out there. Or I don't know if it was the first, but.
Well, first of the Spanish name brands for an American sports team in baseball that of which I am aware. However, back in the late 60s in the American Basketball Association, the ABA, there was a team, I believe it was one of the founding members of the American Basketball Association, the Anaheim Amigos. So that was a professional team that existed decades before the Daytona Tortugas. And also, this is a very little known thing about a very well-known team. The Oakland Raiders, who then became the Los Angeles Raiders, then moved back to Oakland, became the Oakland Raiders, and of course are now the Las Vegas Raiders. For their first season, now this also goes back to the late 60s, they were the Oakland Seniors.
Huh. See, this is what I get for throwing something out there like the Tortugas were the first. And, I should have known that the keeper of Studio Simon Stumpers would have all of that trivia right there in your head. This is why this is America's third favorite podcast segment, and I certainly appreciate you being here. Dan, we'll talk to you next time.
Looking forward to it. See ya.